The road leading toward Blackthorn Forest stretched endlessly beneath the golden light of the setting sun. A group of university friends laughed loudly inside an old travel van as music echoed through the hills. They had spent months planning this adventure. Everyone wanted freedom from crowded streets, noisy phones, and exhausting routines. The forest was famous for its untouched beauty, hidden waterfalls mysterious, caves and stories that locals were too afraid to speak about after dark. The group consisted of 8 friends, each carrying excitement in different ways. Some wanted adventure, some wanted photographs, while others only came for fun. Among them were 2 people who barely noticed each other before the trip began. One was a quiet young man who preferred silence over unnecessary conversation. He loved observing nature more than speaking to people. While others laughed loudly, he usually stared outside the window, watching mountains pass by like moving paintings. The other was a fearless young woman with sharp eyes and an untamed spirit. She loved challenges and hated being treated weakly. She was the type of person who climbed rocks before asking whether it was safe. They were complete opposites. Yet fate had already started pulling them toward each other. By the time the group reached Blackthorn, forest darkness had begun swallowing the sky. Tall trees surrounded the narrow road like ancient gods protecting forgotten secrets. The air smelled of pine wood and wild earth. Strange sounds echoed from deep within the forest. One of the boys joked nervously, "If someone disappears tonight, I am leaving everyone behind and running." The others laughed, but the silence of the forest felt heavier after those words. The group carried their bags toward a small wooden campsite near the river. The place looked abandoned, except for a few lanterns hanging beside old cabins. There was no phone signal, no internet, and no nearby town for miles. At first, everyone enjoyed the isolation. They cooked food over a fire, sang songs, and shared ghost stories beneath the stars. The fearless girl sat near the edge of the firelight, staring toward the darkness between the trees. The quiet young man noticed her sitting alone and walked over with a cup of coffee. "You look like you're planning to explore the entire forest tonight," he said softly. She smirked. "Maybe I am." "You are not scared." "Of trees." "No, of what hides behind them." For the first time she looked directly into his eyes. "Maybe monsters are less dangerous than people." Those words stayed inside his mind long after the conversation ended. The next morning the group decided to hike deeper into the forest toward a hidden waterfall mentioned on an old map. The journey started with excitement. Birds flew above the trees, sunlight slipped through the branches, and the river guided their path like silver glass. But after several hours the forest slowly changed. The trees became denser. The paths disappeared. Even the air felt colder. One of the girls suggested returning before sunset, but the fearless young woman insisted. They were close to the waterfall. The quiet young man stayed beside her while the others argued behind them. Eventually, they found the waterfall hidden between giant cliffs. Everyone stood speechless as crystal water crashed into a glowing blue lake beneath the rocks. It looked unreal, like something from an ancient dream. People rushed to take photos while others explored nearby caves. The fearless girl walked too close to the slippery edge of a cliff. Suddenly, the rock beneath her foot cracked. Before anyone could scream, she slipped. The quiet young man reacted instantly and grabbed her wrist. For one terrifying moment, her body hung over the sharp rocks below, while he struggled to pull her back. The others froze in fear. With all his strength, he pulled her onto solid ground. She crashed against him, breathing heavily. Their faces were inches apart. For the first time in her life, fear shook her entire body, and for the first time, he realized losing someone could hurt. Even before they truly belonged to you. That night, the atmosphere changed completely. The group became quieter after the accident. Some wanted to leave immediately the next morning, but heavy fog surrounded the forest by dawn. Their vehicles refused to start, and strange noises echoed around the campsite during the night. One of the boys tried joking again, but nobody laughed this time. As darkness returned, tension grew stronger. The fearless girl sat beside the river, alone staring into the flowing water. The quiet young man found her there again. "You almost died today," he said. "But I didn't. You could have." She looked down silently. After a long pause, she whispered, "When I slipped, I thought nobody would catch me." His chest tightened hearing those words. "Why would you think that? Because people always leave?" The wind moved softly through the trees around them. He sat beside her quietly before saying, "Then maybe you've been surrounded by the wrong people." For the first time, her strong expression weakened. Something invisible began growing between them, something neither of them understood yet. The following day, the group attempted to leave. Again, but the forest seemed strangely endless. Every path somehow led them back to the same place. Panic slowly spread among the friends. Food supplies became limited. Fear replaced excitement. Arguments started. Some blamed the map, others blamed the weather. But deep inside, everyone felt something unnatural about the forest. That evening, while searching for another route, the quiet young man and the fearless girl became separated from the others. By the time they realized it, darkness had already surrounded them. The forest at night looked alive, branches twisted like shadows. Distant howls echoed between the trees. The girl tried staying calm, but fear finally reached her eyes. "We need to find the others," she whispered. "We will." They walked for hours through endless darkness until they found an abandoned wooden cabin, hidden beneath massive trees. The cabin looked ancient. Dust covered the windows, yet a weak lantern glowed inside. The young man carefully opened the door. The cabin was empty except for old furniture, blankets, and a fireplace. They decided to stay there until morning. Rain didn't fall. Thunder didn't roar. Instead, silence ruled the night. The girl sat beside the fire while he searched the cabin for supplies. "You know," she said quietly, "I used to think love was stupid." He looked at her curiously. "And now?" She smiled faintly. "Now I think maybe people are just afraid of caring too much." The firelight reflected in her eyes beautifully. He sat beside her. "Maybe caring is the bravest thing a person can do." Their eyes locked again. This time neither looked away. Slowly she rested her head against his shoulder. Outside, the forest moved endlessly beneath the moonlight, but inside the cabin, everything felt peaceful for the first time. Hours later, terrifying screams echoed somewhere deep within the woods. They both stood instantly. Another scream followed. One of their friends. Without hesitation, they ran outside together, carrying flashlights. The forest became a nightmare of shadows and confusion. Branches scratched their skin as they searched desperately through the darkness. Eventually, they found one of the group members injured near a cliff. He explained that something chased them during the night, causing everyone to scatter in different directions. Fear consumed all of them now. The quiet young man helped carry the injured friend back toward the cabin while the fearless girl guided the way. Throughout the terrifying journey, they protected each other constantly. Every danger brought them closer. Every fear strengthened their bond. Days passed inside the endless forest. Survival became more important than comfort. The group struggled for food, warmth, and hope. Yet somehow, amidst all the chaos, love quietly bloomed between two souls who once felt completely alone. One cold evening while the other slept, the fearless girl walked outside the cabin. The quiet young man followed her. The moon illuminated the trees silver and blue. "I don't want this to end," she admitted softly. "The forest." She shook her head. "This." He understood immediately. For a moment, neither spoke. Then he gently held her hand. "I spent my whole life feeling invisible," he confessed. "But when I am with you, it feels like I finally exist." Tears filled her eyes. She stepped closer to him. "I think I started falling for you the moment you pulled me from that cliff. And I think I fell for you before that." The distance between them disappeared. Under the silent moonlight of the terrifying forest, they kissed for the first time. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't planned. But it felt real enough to stop time itself. From that moment onward, they became inseparable. They protected each other during every dangerous journey through the forest. When wild animals approached, they stood together. When fear destroyed the group as hope, they became each other as strength. The others noticed how deeply they cared for one another. It was no longer ordinary affection. It became the kind of love where two people would rather suffer themselves than watch the other get hurt. One morning, while exploring deeper into the forest, searching for an exit, they discovered old symbols carved into giant stones. Hidden beside them was a narrow pathway leading through the cliffs. Hope returned instantly. The group followed the dangerous trail carefully for hours, until sunlight finally appeared beyond the trees. They had found the way out. Everyone cried with relief. But during the final climb down the rocky path, disaster struck again. The ground beneath the fearless girl collapsed suddenly. She slipped toward the edge of a steep cliff. Without thinking, the quiet young man grabbed her hand. While hanging onto a tree branch with the other, the cliff crumbled beneath them. The other screamed in horror. He struggled desperately to pull her upward, but the rocks kept breaking. "You have to let go," she cried. "Never. You'll die with me." "I don't care." Tears streamed down her face. For the first time in her life, someone chose her over their own safety. That realization shattered every wall around her heart. The others quickly formed a chain and managed to pull both of them back to safety. Seconds before the cliff collapsed completely, they lay on the ground, breathing heavily while holding each other tightly. Neither wanted to let go. When they finally escaped, Blackthorn Forest, the outside world felt strangely different. Cars moved, cities glowed. People laughed normally, but none of it mattered as much anymore, because inside that terrifying forest, two strangers had found something stronger than fear itself. Months later, their friends often talked about the horrifying adventure that nearly destroyed them. But whenever someone asked the quiet young man and the fearless young woman about the forest, they always smiled differently, because while others remembered terror, they remembered the place where two lost souls found a love worth dying for.